What happens when you catch your husband red-handed with another woman? Well, I decided to make sure he learned a lesson he'd never forget. But what I did next shocked everyone. Even me. From a simple act of revenge to an emergency rescue involving firefighters. This was the ultimate payback. Here's how it all went down. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon when I decided to take a break from the usual hustle and bustle of my life. The house was quiet, save for the occasional hum of the refrigerator and the soft tapping of raindrops against the windows. The house had been unusually calm that day, as if the universe had conspired to give me a few moments of peace. It had been a long week, filled with work, errands, family obligations, and the nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. My husband, Charles, was out running errands, so I figured this would be the perfect opportunity to do a deep cleaning of the house. I had been meaning to clean out the car for a while now, as it had become a cluttered mess with old coffee cups, receipts, and discarded wrappers filling the back seat and floor. Charles was notorious for leaving his belongings strewn about, and his car was no exception. It was a typical Saturday ritual for me to tidy up the spaces he frequented, hoping that a clean home would lift my spirits and somehow bring peace to the chaos that had surrounded us for months. I grabbed my cleaning supplies, tossed the trash bags into the trunk, and headed for the garage. The car sat there, looking innocent enough, parked under the carport. I opened the door, greeted by the familiar scent of leather and dust, and got to work. The leather seats creaked as I moved the seat forward to vacuum the floor mats. As I moved the driver's seat back, a glint of something shiny caught my eye. It was tucked under the passenger seat, partially hidden beneath a layer of dust. I leaned closer, brushing aside a stray napkin and some crumpled tissues. What I found made my heart skip a beat. There, under the seat, was a small, innocuous-looking tube. I initially assumed it was a bottle of hand sanitizer, or maybe some sort of ointment. But as I picked it up, I noticed the label. My blood ran cold as I read the words printed across the front. Lubricant for intimate use. My hands shook slightly as I held the tube in my grasp, the realization slowly sinking in. My husband had been hiding something from me. For a moment, I stood frozen, staring at the tube in disbelief. I didn't know how to react. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Was this a mistake? Did he forget to throw it away? Had it been in the car for months? I tried to rationalize it, to find an excuse, to tell myself that it wasn't what I thought it was. But the evidence was right there, plain as day. A tube of lubricant, carefully tucked under the seat. The more I stared at it, the more it felt like a betrayal. I set the tube down on the passenger seat, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been going on behind my back, something that I hadn't known about. The image of my husband, the man I thought I knew so well, kept flashing before my eyes. Had he been unfaithful? Was this his way of hiding something from me? The thought of it made me feel sick to my stomach. I couldn't just leave it there. I couldn't ignore it, hoping that it would somehow disappear. It was as if the universe had thrown this in my path for a reason. The weight of the discovery was heavy, and I had to confront it, to make sense of it, no matter how much it hurt. I sat in the car for what felt like an eternity, the rain now pounding harder against the windows. My thoughts were swirling, and I could feel the anger rising within me. But I didn't want to act in haste. I knew I needed to be careful, to think this through before jumping to conclusions. I had to approach this situation with calm and rationality, no matter how much it threatened to overwhelm me. What made the discovery even more painful was the fact that Charles and I had always been so close. Or at least I thought we had been. We had been together for years, built a life together, shared our hopes and dreams, and created a home filled with love. Sure, like any couples, we had our ups and downs, but I never imagined that he would betray me in such a way. I couldn't fathom how he could do something like this without me knowing. But here I was, faced with undeniable evidence that something had been going on behind my back. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces started to fall into place. There had been signs. Small things I had brushed off at the time. The late nights at work. The constant excuses. The subtle changes in his behavior. At first, I had tried to convince myself that I was overthinking it. That it was just a phase. That he was just stressed out. But deep down, I knew I had been ignoring the truth. Now, there it was, staring me in the face. I took a deep breath and tried to steady my nerves. I couldn't let this discovery define me. Couldn't let it dictate how I would react. The first step, I told myself, was to keep calm and assess the situation objectively. I wasn't going to let my emotions take control. I had to confront Charles about this, but I wasn't sure how to approach him. What would I say? How would I even begin to ask him about something so painful? I looked at the tube of lubricant one last time, my hand still trembling as I picked it up. This was it. This was the moment that everything would change. The trust I had placed in my husband, the foundation of our relationship, had been shattered in an instant. I felt a wave of sadness wash over me, but I pushed it down. There was no time for tears. There was no time to wallow in self-pity. I needed answers, and I needed them now. Before I made my decision, I took a final look at the car. It was a place that had once been a sanctuary for both of us, a place where we shared so many memories. Long drives, spontaneous trips, and quiet moments together. Now, it felt like a crime scene, tainted by the discovery of something I never wanted to know. I took the tube and placed it in my purse, knowing that I would confront Charles with it when he returned home. I didn't know how he would react, or what the conversation would lead to, but I knew that it was time to face the truth. Whatever happened next, I couldn't go on pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. As I finished cleaning out the car and started to head back inside, I realized that this discovery had changed everything. It was no longer about the little messes or the small irritations that come with being in a relationship. It was about something much deeper. It was about trust, betrayal, and the truth that I had been unwilling to face until now. The rain was still pouring down, but I felt oddly calm as I walked back to the house. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that whatever it was going to be different. I wasn't sure how I was going to handle the conversation with Charles, but I had already made up my mind. I was going to confront him, ask him the hard questions, and demand the truth. And no matter how painful it was, I was ready to face it. After I had found the tube of lubricant hidden under the seat, everything in my world seemed to shift. The calm that had settled over me moments before was now gone, replaced by a whirlwind of emotions I had never expected to feel. Betrayal, anger, disbelief. They all crashed into me like a wave. The moment was surreal, like I was standing outside of my own body, watching everything unfold. There was no denying it. The evidence was clear. I couldn't pretend I didn't see it. I couldn't ignore what had been hidden in plain sight, right under my nose. For a few moments, I simply stood there in the car, staring at the tube in my hand, my thoughts racing. What was I supposed to do with this information? How should I handle this? I didn't want to let the anger dictate my actions, but I knew something had to be done. I had to confront Charles. I had to make him face the reality of his actions. But that wasn't enough. No. Something inside me wanted more than just a conversation, more than just an explanation. I needed to take control, to feel as though I had some power in this situation. I wasn't going to sit idly by and allow him to get away with this. When the plan started to form, it wasn't a decision made in haste. Rather, it was a quiet realization that the gloves were off. Charles had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let it slide without teaching him a lesson. But what kind of lesson? What could I do that would show him how deeply his actions had affected me? How could I make him feel the weight of his betrayal? Just a fraction of the way I was feeling it. As I sat there, thinking it through, a strange sense of calm washed over me. The anger had dulled, and a kind of cold clarity had taken its place. I knew exactly what I was going to do. It would be simple, effective, and it would leave an impression on him that he would never forget. I had to act first, and I had to be smart about it. I couldn't let him know I knew about the lubricant yet. I had to keep my cool, stay composed, and wait for the right moment. This wasn't about revenge for the sake of it. It was about ensuring that Charles would never, ever take me for granted again. It was about making him understand the consequences of his actions. And to do that, I had to be strategic. I thought about the tube I had found, its unassuming appearance hiding its true purpose. It was clear that Charles had been using it in secret, perhaps thinking he could get away with it. I wondered how many times he had hidden things from me, how many lies he had told. But instead of getting consumed by anger and resentment, I decided to take the high road. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to yell. No. I was going to do something far more effective. I was going to make a statement. One that would resonate far longer than any words could. I didn't need to confront him immediately. No. I needed to wait for the right opportunity. But I knew what had to be done. I knew the perfect way to ensure that Charles would understand the magnitude of what he had done. There was a certain sense of satisfaction that came with the idea. Though it wasn't about pleasure. It was about reclaiming my power. About reminding myself that I could still take control of my life. Despite the betrayal. The plan was simple, yet so effective. I would replace the lubricant with something far more unforgiving. Industrial-strength glue. It wasn't just any glue. It was a type of adhesive that was designed for heavy-duty tasks. A substance so strong that once something was glued with it, there was no going back. It was a perfect metaphor for the situation. A bond that couldn't be undone. Just like the trust between us. I would quietly swap out the lubricant, placing the glue in its place. Then, I would wait. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. It wasn't complicated. And it didn't require any complex setup. I didn't need to plan out an elaborate scheme. The execution was going to be flawless, because all I had to do was be patient. I didn't have to say a word to Charles. At least not yet. I didn't have to confront him immediately. The glue would do the talking for me. It would be a subtle message, but a powerful one. The next few hours were spent preparing. I made sure to keep my emotions in check, not allowing any signs of suspicion to arise. I couldn't afford to give anything away. I went to the garage, retrieved the tube of lubricant from my purse, and carefully swapped it with the glue. The process was meticulous, ensuring that everything looked as it had before. No one would suspect a thing. Charles would never know what hit him. The plan was set into motion. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel remorse. All I felt was a sense of clarity, like I was finally taking control of a situation that had spun out of my hands. For too long, I had allowed my husband to make decisions without considering me, without thinking about the consequences. But this was my moment to turn the tables. I was no longer the passive partner in our marriage. I was taking charge, and I was going to make sure he understood the depth of his betrayal. Once the swap was done, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. The worst was yet to come. Of course, I had no idea how Charles would react when he realized what had happened. But that was part of the thrill. The uncertainty. The anticipation. It made the plan all the more exhilarating. I wasn't just trying to hurt him. I was trying to teach him a lesson. One that would leave a mark. I wanted him to understand that his actions had consequences. That the lies he told had consequences. And that he could no longer hide behind his excuses. I sat back and waited. I didn't make any moves. I didn't seek out confrontation. All I had to do now was sit back and watch. The ball was in his court. What happened next was entirely up to him. The days passed slowly, but the tension didn't go away. I could feel it building inside me. The anticipation of what was to come. I wasn't sure how Charles would react. I didn't know what he would say. But I knew one thing for sure. He would never look at me the same way again. And that was the point. I wasn't going to let this betrayal slide. I wasn't going to let him think that he could get away with it. He would learn. one way or another. As the days wore on, I couldn't help but wonder how long it would take for Charles to notice the change. How long would it take for him to figure out that his secret had been uncovered? How long would it take for him to feel the weight of his own actions? Whatever the outcome, I knew I had made the right choice. The plan was set, and now it was up to him to face the music. The day had come. The plan I had so carefully laid out was ready to be executed. Everything had fallen into place. I had swapped the lubricant with the industrial glue, hidden the evidence, and was now waiting for the perfect moment to watch the whole thing unfold. But the process of execution, the moment when everything I had set in motion would come to life, was not as straightforward as I had initially thought. When I first came up with the idea, it seemed like a simple, harmless plan. It wasn't intended to be malicious, but rather a quiet act of revenge. A message that would make Charles realize the magnitude of his betrayal. After all, this was not just about the lubricant or the glue. It was about restoring control to my life, about reminding myself that I had a voice, that I was not going to sit idly by and allow him to break my trust. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this was something I had to do. I had spent the last few days preparing, making sure that everything was perfect. I didn't want to rush through the execution. I had carefully planned each step, each action, and each move. I had even rehearsed what I might say to him when the moment arrived. But what I hadn't anticipated was how surreal it would all feel, how unsettling it would be to actually go through with it. There was something strange about the anticipation, about knowing that what I was about to do was going to change everything. I could feel the nervous energy building inside me as I sat in the living room, watching the clock tick by. Charles wasn't home yet, but I knew he would be back soon. I had already cleaned up the house, making sure that everything looked normal. I didn't want to give anything away. The last thing I wanted was for him to suspect that something was off. It had to look like any other day, even though everything inside me was screaming that it wasn't. The hours seemed to drag on as I waited. I kept checking my phone, thinking I could distract myself with work or social media, but nothing could keep my mind from returning to the plan. I knew it wasn't healthy to dwell on it so much, but I couldn't help it. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to shift, something irreversible. As much as I wanted to believe that I was in control, the truth was that I wasn't sure how this would all play out. What if he didn't notice? What if the glue didn't cause the reaction I expected? What if he somehow figured out what I had done before it even happened? 1,000 what ifs swirled around in my mind, each one feeding my anxiety. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I heard the familiar sound of Charles' car pulling into the driveway. My heart skipped a beat. This was it. The moment of truth. I could feel the tension rising in my chest, but I forced myself to remain calm, to act as if everything was perfectly normal. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves, and walked into the kitchen to pretend I was doing something. I didn't want to be too obvious, to make him suspicious. I needed to let him discover the situation on his own. Charles walked through the front door, greeting me with his usual enthusiasm. He didn't seem to notice anything unusual. Of course, he wouldn't. Why would he? Everything seemed perfectly normal, just like any other day. He didn't know what I had done, and I wasn't about to tell him. He went about his routine, getting a drink and sitting down on the couch, as if everything was fine. But in the back of my mind, I knew it wasn't. It wasn't fine. It couldn't be. The plan I had set in motion had already begun, and now all I had to do was wait. As I sat there, pretending to be distracted, I could feel the anticipation growing within me. I couldn't take my eyes off him. Every time he moved, every time he shifted in his seat, I wondered if he had already noticed. Was he feeling the same sense of unease that I was? Could he sense that something wasn't right? The silence between us was almost deafening. It was as if we were both pretending that everything was okay, when in reality, it was anything but. After a few minutes, Charles got up and walked to the kitchen, I couldn't see what he was doing, but I knew it wouldn't be long before he discovered what had happened. I felt a strange sense of dread mixed with curiosity. What would happen next? Would he explode with anger? Would he be confused? Would he even notice? My mind raced as I tried to predict his reaction, but the truth was that I had no idea how he would respond. The plan was in motion, but everything was out of my hands now. I had done my part. The rest was up to him. Suddenly, I heard a loud exclamation from the kitchen. My heart stopped. The moment had arrived. Charles had found the glue. I could feel my pulse quicken as I rushed to the kitchen, unable to stop myself from reacting. He was standing there, staring at the tube in his hand, his face a mixture of confusion and disbelief. He looked at it, then back at me, his eyes narrowing. I had never seen him look so bewildered. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, holding up the tube of glue. For a moment, I said nothing. I let the silence hang in the air between us, knowing that whatever I said next would be crucial. The bowl was in my cart. I had to be careful. I couldn't let my emotions take over. I had to stay calm and collected, even though every part of me wanted to scream. "Well," Charles pressed, his voice rising, "why the hell is this in place of the lubricant?" I took a deep breath and looked him in the eye. "You tell me," I said, my voice steady. "You re the one who left it in the car. You re the one who been hiding things from me." He stared at me for a moment, his expression shifting from confusion to realization. It wasn't just the glue he was processing. It was everything. The pieces started to fall into place. The lies, the secrets, the late nights. It all started to come together in his mind. He knew exactly what I was implying. And that when it hit him, I wasn't just angry. I wasn't just confronting him about the lubricant. I was confronting him about everything. The silence between us was thick with tension, each word we spoke adding weight to the already fragile atmosphere. I could feel his gaze on me, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't backing down. Not anymore. And so, the plan had been executed. The message had been delivered. Loud and clear. Charles could no longer hide behind his lies. The glue was a symbol, a stark reminder that there were no easy fixes for the betrayal he had caused. Whatever happened next, I knew I had taken control. I had finally made him see the consequences of his actions. The plan had worked, and the bowl was now in his cot. The silence that followed was deafening. It was as if the world around us had stopped moving. The sound of Charles's labored breathing and the faint hum of the refrigerator were the only things I could hear as we stood there, locked in a tense standoff. The truth had been laid bare, and neither of us knew how to move forward. It wasn't just about the tube of glue anymore. It was about everything that had led up to that moment. Everything we had been avoiding, pretending wasn't there. The lies, the secrets, the distance, the betrayal. For what felt like an eternity, neither of us spoke. I watched as Charles shifted uneasily, his eyes darting between the glue and me. His face flushed, then paled, as if he were trying to process what was happening. His hands trembled slightly as he set the tube down on the counter, then wiped his palms against his pants, as though trying to rid himself of the weight of what had just transpired. He opened his mouth several times, but no words came out. It was like he was searching for something to say, some explanation that could fix the unfixable. But there was no explanation. Not anymore. I felt a strange calm wash over me, as if I were an observer in my own life, watching this moment unfold from a distance. I had always known that something was off in our relationship, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. But now, in the wake of this discovery, it was all becoming painfully clear. There was no more pretending, no more denying the cracks that had been forming in our marriage for months, maybe even years. The glue was a metaphor for everything we had tried to ignore, everything that had been sticky and messy beneath the surface, now impossible to hide. When Charles finally spoke, his voice was low, almost too quiet to hear. I don't know what to say," he admitted, his words heavy with shame. I never meant for you to find out like this. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. I wasn't sure what to feel anymore. Anger. Yes. Betrayal. Absolutely. But beneath it all, there was a deep sense of sadness, as if something precious had been lost forever. I had trusted him. We had built a life together, one that I thought was unshakable. And now it felt like all of it was crumbling in front of me. You never meant for me to find out. I finally managed to ask, my voice tight. Is that your excuse? You've been lying to me, hiding things from me, and this is how you justify it. Charles winced as if my words had physically struck him. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. He just stood there, looking as lost as I felt. The man I had shared my life with, the one I had trusted above all others, was standing in front of me, unable to offer any real explanation or defense for his actions. I couldn't believe it. This wasn't the man I thought I knew. The man I had built my future with. The man I had once called my partner was now a stranger, and the weight of that realization hit me harder than I could have imagined. All the love I had poured into our relationship, all the years of shared memories, had been reduced to nothing more than lies and secrets, and I wasn't sure how to process that. The air in the kitchen felt thick, as if it were pressing down on me, making it harder to breathe. I could feel the sting of tears behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I had cried enough. I had shed enough tears over this man, over this marriage, and I wasn't about to let him see me break down. Not now. Not like this. I had to be strong. I never wanted to hurt you, Charles said finally, his voice shaky. He took a step toward me, but I instinctively took a step back, putting more distance between us. I know I've made mistakes, but I never meant to betray you. You have to believe me. I shook my head, my heart heavy with confusion. How can I believe anything you say now? I whispered, my voice barely audible. How can I believe you after everything? Charles's face twisted with guilt, his eyes brimming with tears. But I couldn't find it in myself to feel sorry for him. Not after everything he had put me through. I had been blind to the signs for far too long, convincing myself that things would get better, that he would change, that we would fix it. But now, standing here in the aftermath of his betrayal, I realized how foolish I had been. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, Charles continued, his voice breaking, but I want to make things right. I will do whatever it takes to fix this. Fix this. Those words, so simple and yet so loaded with meaning, hung in the air between us. How could he fix something that had already been shattered beyond repair? How could he undo the damage he had caused? How could he erase the pain, the disappointment, the broken trust? There was no way to fix this. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. You can't fix it, Charles, I said, my voice steady but filled with sorrow. You've already broken it. You've broken us. His eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in them. He had been so confident before, so sure that he could get away with whatever he had been doing. But now, in the face of my words, the reality of the situation was sinking in. He wasn't in control anymore. I was, and I wasn't going to let him off the hook. I don't know what happened, Charles said, his voice barely a whisper now. I don't know how it got this far. I looked at him, my eyes cold and unyielding. It got this far because you didn't care enough to stop it. It got this far because you thought you could hide it from me. You didn't think I would ever find out. Did you? He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't give him a chance. I wasn't interested in his excuses anymore. I wasn't interested in his empty promises. All I wanted was for him to understand the weight of his actions, to realize that this was the end. There was no going back. There was no fixing this. The minutes stretched on in silence as I stood there, trying to absorb the full magnitude of what had just happened. The man I had loved, The man I had trusted with my heart had betrayed me in a way that I could never have imagined. And now, I had to face the aftermath. As the tension in the room continued to build, I realized that it wasn't just about Charles. It was about me, too. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my self-respect, my peace of mind. I had spent so long trying to hold onto a relationship that was already broken, trying to salvage something that couldn't be saved. But now, I knew it was time to let go. It was time to move on. I think it's time for you to leave, I said finally, my voice firm. I need space. I need to think. And I need you to go. Charles stood there, motionless, for a moment before nodding slowly. He didn't argue. He didn't try to fight it. He simply turned and walked out of the silence in the house seemed to stretch endlessly. Charles had left. His departure a quiet one, with no words of protest, no last-minute apologies or attempts to justify his actions. It was almost as if he knew that the door had closed behind him for good. And as I stood there, still reeling from the gravity of everything that had transpired, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. It was a peace born not of resolution or closure, but of finality. The storm that had been brewing for so long had finally come to a head. And now, there was nothing left but to pick up the pieces. But picking up those pieces wasn't as simple as it seemed. For all the clarity I had gained in the moment of confrontation, there was still an overwhelming sense of uncertainty that lingered. What would happen next? How would I move on from this? What did the future hold? These questions swirled around in my mind, but I pushed them aside for the moment. The immediate task at hand was to process what had happened and find a way to regain control of my life. I didn't have much time to think before the phone rang. The sudden sound of it jolted me from my thoughts, and for a moment, I didn't know whether to answer or let it go to voicemail. But something urged me to pick it up. Maybe it was curiosity, or perhaps it was the need to escape the silence that had become suffocating. Whatever the reason, I pressed the button and brought the phone to my ear. "Hello," I said, my voice betraying none of the turmoil I was feeling inside. "Is this Mrs. Johnson?" a voice on the other end asked. A familiar, friendly voice I hadn't heard in a while. I paused for a moment, trying to place it. Then it clicked. Laurie, my next-door neighbor. We had spoken only a few times, but we had always gotten along well enough. She was a sweet woman, a little older than me, with a gentle demeanor and a knack for making people feel at ease. She had always been there when I needed a friendly face, a cup of tea, or a word of encouragement. But now, hearing her voice, I had no idea why she was calling. "Yes, this is Mrs. Johnson," I replied, a hint of confusion in my voice. "Are you okay?" Laurie asked, her voice laced with concern. "I just wanted to check in. I heard some noises coming from your house earlier, and I was worried. It sounded like there was a commotion. Is everything all right?" The question caught me off guard. I hadn't realized that anyone had been listening, let alone heard the conversation between Charles and me. But then again, we had been so wrapped up in our confrontation, so consumed by the weight of the situation, that I hadn't considered the outside world. The walls of the house had felt so suffocatingly close. But now, it was as if the world outside had been watching, waiting, and listening. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. There was no need to go into the details with Laurie. No need to explain everything that had just transpired. I didn't owe her that. Not right now. But she was still my neighbor, and I couldn't simply ignore her concern. "I am fine," I said, my voice calm and controlled. "It's just been a tough day, but I am all right. Thank you for checking in." There was a pause on the other end, and then Laurie spoke again, this time with more insistence. "Are you sure? You don't sound all right. It's okay to talk about it. You know, you don't have to go through this alone." The sincerity in her voice was undeniable, and for a moment, I felt a lump form in my throat. It was so easy to forget that people cared. So easy to close myself off and hide the hurt. But Laurie wasn't letting me shut her out. And something about her kindness, her willingness to help, broke through the wall I had been trying to build around myself. I swallowed hard, then sighed. I don't know what happened. Laurie. It's just, everything has come to a head today. Charles. He's been hiding things from me. And I found out. And now, I am not sure what to do. It feels like everything has fallen apart. Laurie was quiet for a moment, letting me speak. And when she did respond, it was with the softest of tones, like a mother comforting a child. I am so sorry. Dear. I know it's hard. But you don't have to figure everything out right now. Take your time. Whatever you need. I am here for you. If you want to talk, or if you need anything at all, just let me know. The words hit me harder than I expected, and a wave of emotion rushed over me. The thought of someone being there, offering support without judgment, without hesitation, was overwhelming. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear those words, how much I needed someone to remind me that I wasn't alone. For the first time since everything had begun to unravel, I felt a small, tentative sense of relief. Maybe it wasn't all lost. Maybe there was still a chance to rebuild, even if it meant doing so alone. Thank you, Laurie, I said softly, my voice barely a whisper. I really appreciate it. I'll be okay. I just need some time. Laurie's voice was filled with warmth as she responded. Take all the time you need. And don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. I am just next door. With that, the conversation ended, and I hung up the phone, feeling strangely comforted. It wasn't much, but it was enough to help me take a breath, to pause and gather my thoughts. Sometimes, a small act of kindness, a reminder that someone cared, could make all the difference. As I sat there, the weight of everything still heavy on my shoulders, I realized something important. It wasn't about fixing everything immediately, or finding the perfect solution. It was about taking one step at a time, giving myself the space to process the pain and confusion, and trusting that I would find my way out of it. The path wouldn't be easy, but it would be mine to walk. The hours that followed were filled with introspection. I didn't have any grand plans for what would come next, but I knew I had to start somewhere. I needed to heal. I needed to rediscover who I was outside of the role I had played in my marriage. I had been so consumed by the relationship, by trying to fix things that weren't mine to fix, that I had lost sight of myself. It was time to take back control of my life, to put myself first for once. The next day, I woke up with a renewed sense of determination. The house felt emptier without Charles, and the silence was still deafening, but I didn't let it overwhelm me. I went through the motions of the day, making breakfast, tidying up, and even tackling some small projects I had been putting off for weeks. With each task, I felt a little more in control, a little more grounded. And then, later that evening, as I was finishing up dinner, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment, I hesitated. But then, I opened the door to find Laurie standing there, a warm smile on her face and a plate of homemade cookies in her hands. I thought you might need a little treat, she said, her eyes kind and understanding. Just something to brighten your day. I smiled, the simple gesture making me feel more at peace than I had in days. Thank you, I said, my voice filled with gratitude. You're a lifesaver. And in that moment, I realized that even in the midst of the pain and confusion, there was still kindness, still hope. There was still the possibility of healing, one small step at a time. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I wasn't alone. And for the first time in a long while, that thought brought me a sense of comfort. Hey there. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you never miss an update. Your support means the world to us. and it helps us bring more exciting content your way. Thanks for being part of the community. See you in the next one.